Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher's here from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can find on any podcasting platform or on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Let's go Inside the Birds as they get ready to take on the Kansas City Chiefs, Geoff Mosher. This is like the Spider-Man guy that points at himself. These teams like mirror images. Andy Reid kind of set the foundation of that comment that you heard from Jeffrey Lurie. I want to win more Lombardis, and that is all possible, really, from where Andy Reid started this thing back in 1999, and now here they are, kind of apropos, isn't it?
It is kind of apropos. If you look in the last the last 6 years, you've got 3 trophies, 2 coming from Kansas City, 1 coming from Philadelphia, right? And maybe again this year. In the last 10 years, no team has won more home games than the Kansas City Chiefs because Arrowhead is such a great stadium. And, of course, Andy Reid has always been a good home coach. And this is interesting because in his short tenure so far, Nick Sirianni's road record, which I don't have in front of me, but it's one of the most – it's like a 78% winning clip on the road, something so astronomically high that it's hard to be sustainable, but for the moment is really, really good. So you've got a lot of favorable stats for both teams, both franchises hanging in the balance for this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, and Andy obviously kind of started this thing and back in the 90s when he was hired, and since he's gone to Kansas City, he rebuilt them. Don't take for granted, Kansas City was not a perennial Super Bowl team, and now both these teams are, Geoff. And what I like about this matchup this time is it's both teams coming off of a bye. So it's not, well, they're great off the bye, and they have both teams off the bye, both teams right smack in the middle of their season. This isn't an early season where it's too early. It's kind of like an extended preseason or too late where one team maybe has the division this game for both of these teams in the middle of the year, and that's what makes this one a really cool matchup.
It really does, and I believe it was on your show yesterday, Mike, that it was mentioned that this is the first Monday Night Football matchup ever between two teams that have won at least
sixth
7
time.
of their
It's the
games.
sixth time in Monday Night Football history.
Oh, 6th time, but it's got probably the first time in quite a while, I would imagine. So that's impressive. I mean, that shows you where these two franchises are at. It is important because as great as both teams have played, they're not exactly running away with the number 1 seed. The Eagles are 8-1, and they should be considered a runaway 1 seed, except for the fact that the Detroit Lions are 7-2. And if you compare the schedules for the Eagles in 4 or 5 weeks and the Lions over the next 4 or 5 weeks, you would say the Eagles really need to make sure that they win 4 of their next 5 games at least, to keep pace and hold the advantage that they have right now over the Lions. And of course, the Chiefs are 7-2, but you've got the Ravens chasing them down. You've got a couple of 6-win teams there in the AFC. So, and they're not exactly sort of like the Eagles. They're not exactly a juggernaut. They've won some really close games this year. They're not the same team as they were last year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot hanging in the balance here for both.
By the way, the last time it happened was 2019. The Niners played the Seahawks. It happened in 2018. The Rams played the Chiefs. I think that was that 54-51 game that went back and forth. I think some of the numbers in this game as they get ready to match up here that are pretty daunting and pretty unbelievable when you think about it. Did I just boot you out? Was that me?
No, I think I may have accidentally hit something. My apologies.
Gotcha.
Well, you said the last time it happened was when again?
The last time it happened was in 20 – I just had it in front of me. Where was it? What did I say, 2019? Yeah, there it is. 2019, Week 10, the 49ers played the Seahawks. In 2018, the Rams played the Chiefs. That was that 54-51 game that they played. Then before that, it was 1992. The Dolphins played the Bills. In 84, the Seahawks played the Raiders. And in 75, the Oilers, who no longer exist, played the Steelers. So those are the only times that two teams of 7 or more wins have met in Week 11 or earlier in the season. So you got that in this game is, and you could probably speak to this a little bit more, you covered Andy Reid. Mm-hmm. The number of 39-6 is the record of Patrick Mahomes in the months of November and December, they have won 14 straight games in the month of November. Andy has his teams the second half of the year just focused for the big prize.
Yeah. Now, when I was covering the Eagles, Andy's teams, this was, sort of the second part of his Eagles tenure from 2005 till 2012. Those teams would actually start off kind of slowly and then really pick it up in November and December, as opposed to his first 5 or 6 years when his teams were kind of dominant from start to finish. But since becoming the Chiefs coach, he has done the same thing as far as being able to win games in November and December. It's probably helped him out that he's been in the same division. Usually you play your division games later in the year, and he's been in the same division as the Raiders and the Broncos, and the Chargers haven't been a powerhouse either. It's not exactly the Patriots, always beating up on the Dolphins and the Jets and the Bills for quite a while. But it's pretty similar in that, he's owned the division, and I think that's been really big for him.
Yeah. By the way, 12 straight wins for Jalen Hurts against teams with winning records. So something has to give. Either that win streak is being snapped or the 14 straight games in November is being snapped. Let's look at some of the things leading up to this game most this week. Let's start with Justin Evans. Open the practice window, if he plays or not. But what is his role now moving forward in your mind with Kevin Byard added to this team?
Well, it gives him an opportunity. Obviously, Byard is going to start next to Reed Blankenship. But you saw that when they needed to play a little bit of some big nickel, they were playing Sidney Brown there. Sidney Brown was not a great matchup in the slot against receivers. There are probably times in big nickel, if you're trying to be defending the pass and the run at the same time, like a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, or something like that, Sidney's good for that. But Justin will give them that opportunity to have a little bit more of a coverage guy as a third safety if they want to go that route. It's kind of funny because when they started the year, he was a starting safety because they didn't have Byard and Sidney Brown wasn't ready. But he wasn't playing great either. There were times where he was picked on. So, and then obviously he's been hurt, which has been his forte throughout his career. But it does give Sean Desai some more optionality. Bradley Roby is the big question. Does he come back and can he play the slot corner? If he cannot, for whatever reason, come back and play slot corner, or if he comes back but he can't play it 100% because his conditioning's not there, well, then maybe you get an opportunity to play Justin Evans there because Justin Evans has experience playing in the slot. Okay,
let's go to Bradley Roby. Do we anticipate that he's back? I know Sirianni will talk tomorrow, so we might get more there. Should he be back? And if he is, does he go right back to the slot? Is he kind of the guy that hopefully stabilizes that spot? Because some crazy Mahomes number. He is number 1 in the league in completion, yardage, and touchdowns when throwing to the slot receiver.
Does that count tight and Travis Kelce lined up as a slot?
That's a good question. Good question. I would imagine that he does a lot of damage in the slot there, matched up against other team slot receivers. But by the way, flip side, Philadelphia is 30th in completions. They are last in the league in yards and 30th in touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're gonna unless somebody completely overthinks it, you're gonna see a lot of bunch formations from Kansas City Chiefs. You're gonna see a lot of motion. And you are going to see them try to challenge the Eagles' interior defenders, the slot defenders, the third safety, the inside linebackers in the pass game, because A, that's what the Chiefs like to do anyway, and B, that's really what the Eagles have been deficient at this year. And, we talk about Bradley Roby and the importance that he plays, and he does because he's got experience and he's got that IQ of a slot defender, but he was also on the street before the Eagles signed him. I don't want to make him out to be what Avonte Maddox is when Avonte Maddox is healthy either. So it's not, it's still a deficiency for the Eagles. It gets a little better, but it's not exactly an area that the opponent is going to be like, oh man, well, they got Bradley Roby there now, so we can't do all these things that other teams have been able to do. No, they're still going to take aim at that middle of the Eagles defense in the passing game.
Let me get your thoughts on Nakobe Dean going out and what happens in that spot. I mean, obviously Nick Morrow goes there, but upgrade, still looking, got to find somebody else. What do you think?
I really think they need to find a veteran to have on the practice squad. Do you remember last time Nakobe got hurt, they signed Rashaan Evans for a little bit, signing with the Cowboys instead because he thought he'd have more opportunity there. It's not that I think Nick Morrow and Zach Cunningham have been their best linebackers and should play, but you're now talking about one of those guys limping off the field, right? And then you're going to Christian Ellis, who hasn't played much on defense this year, or Ben Van Sumeren as your next up, and he's still on the practice squad, and he hasn't played a lick of defense. He's only played one game, and it was all special teams. So you're very, very shallow at that position now with Nakobe Dean being hurt. And I'm almost surprised that it hasn't happened yet. The Eagles did kick the tires on Anthony Barr. He wound up signing with the Vikings. Barr has kind of been a hybrid player, like a pass rusher / coverage linebacker in his career. But I do think the Eagles still need to, I'm sure this is going on, but if I'm their pro scouting department, I'm looking at every team around the league, looking at their practice squad, looking at some linebackers to see if there's any come and help me.
Yeah, you would think that I agree with you there, that you would think that they have to try to find something in the event that one of these guys get hurt. Not that you have to replace, right? I think that's the key to the conversation, is Nick Morrow. You just got to make sure if Nick Morrow or Zach Cunningham, that one of those get hurt, that somebody can step in and play.
Yeah, it's a rare injury to a starter where you don't really believe that there's a whole lot of drop-off, if there is drop-off at all.
Make a strong argument that Morrow was playing better than Dean.
Sure, and some have told me who've watched the Eagles tape and know about the Eagles that they feel that Zach Cunningham has actually been better than advertised and has even covered better than Zach
I
Cunningham
think so, yeah.
Covers.
No question.
Let's also remember that, the caliber of opponent they're about to face is a lot more daunting than the caliber of opponent that they've already faced. So at some point, I sort of expect the linebackers to I don't want to say come back to the mean and play poorly. I don't expect them to play poorly, but these guys can get picked on.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. What does Cam Jurgens potentially being back? It looks like he should be back. What does that do to this offense? Does it make a big impact, or do you think? Does that coincide with the running game struggling a bit? What do you make of all that?
Cam being back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Mike, really quick, I want to go back to a question. I will answer that, but there is an important thing I left out when you were asking me about Roby coming back and Justin Evans. Those are two coverage guys, right? A slot and a safety who can theoretically is supposed to be good at covering. That gives not just optionality, but it allows Sean Desai to play a dime package, which he has not been able to do for weeks now. And if you remember the last time the Eagles played the Chiefs a couple of years ago at the Link, Jonathan Gannon didn't have a dime. He had Eric Wilson having to defend Tyreek Hill, right, in empty formations because he was throwing more linebackers on the field than cornerbacks. And then you saw last two weeks ago against Dallas, without a dime, they were playing big nickel, and you saw CeeDee Lamb get matched up at times against Nick Morrow, or again, Sidney Brown, who plays more like a linebacker. So if they're able to get Roby and Evans back, again, these guys are not all pros, but it at least gives Sean Desai the optionality of having an actual dime package against a team that likes to throw a lot of receivers on the field, or would definitely move good players into the slot to try to take up that advantage.
That's that. That's definitely a good information for the listeners to hear, is that, hey, there's something more that maybe he can do that he hasn't been able to do based on the personnel.
Right. And as far as Cam Jurgens coming back, he was a really improved player. I thought he had a rough first game against the whole offensive line did against the Patriots in the season opener, but he was getting better. The issue with his replacement, Opeta, was that he looked good to start with, but then, the tape gets developed and he just, he's a backup, and he was asking to be a starter for too long. So they worked on Tyler Steen. They got him in there. He was okay against Dallas, did some good things, did some not so great things. The only question you have now is, can Cam Jurgens, in a really big game here, just go right back into right guard after, you can call it 4 missed games, but it's sort of like 5 missed weeks with the bye. That gave him time to heal, but it's also an extra week that he's not playing in an actual game, and he'll have to have the conditioning. Now, he's a pretty good athlete. I can't imagine it being a huge issue, but he may be a step slower. He hasn't been communicating right on stunts and switch offs and doing things like that over the last 5 weeks, and that doesn't always come back in the snap of a finger when you're new to the position the way he is.
All right, Geoff Mosher, I want to kind of get your thoughts on the matchup in this game. I think it's interesting. Their defense, when they give up 20 or less, they're 7-0. When they give up 20 or more, they are 0-2. When did the Chiefs, by the way, become this defensive juggernaut? These two teams played in February. It was 38-35. Look how different they both are. So what is something in this game that stands out as you watch Monday night?
Yeah, well, that's it. Is that the Chiefs' defensive front, Mike, has really come together. I mean, their secondary has played really well too, but first of all, they've been out without Nick Bolton, who's a really good linebacker, who's been out since October, like 20-something, with a broken wrist, right? And they had a signing in the offseason that seemed like a little depth signing, right? Drew Tranquil from the Chargers, and he's playing pretty well for a guy who was a depth signing. And then up front, Chris Jones is doing a great job. He's playing a lot of both tackle and end, which he's done at times in his career. The guy that they brought over for the 49ers, Charles Omenahu, is a really good defensive lineman. And they're using George Karlaftis in ways that they move him around. They figured out how to get the most out. He was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, and you didn't really hear his name a whole lot. And now you're starting to hear it. So they have a very multiple defensive front that can move guys around. And what that does is, your Eagles offensive line, let's say you see Chris Jones and he's lined up like maybe as a 3 technique or an end on the left side. Well, you're going to slide your line. That's your slide protection. Well, then that leaves one-on-ones on the right side of your line, or vice versa. If you're sliding to the right, it leaves one-on-ones on the left side. So you have to win those one-on-ones, and B, Spags now likes to blitz guys from those areas where the one-on-ones are to create a 3-on-2 and give an extra man. And so that's sort of breaking down a protection scheme, and that's stuff that the offensive line and Jalen Hurts will have to be concerned with. And it's a very fast physical front. Reminds me a little bit of what they've seen in Miami and Dallas as far as just guys who get to the ball really quickly. So you're right. It's made the Kansas City defense stick out as this is what they're defined. But they are very, very, I think they're the number 2 scoring defense in the league, and they're averaging less than 16 points allowed per game. So that just jumps off the page, because usually you're talking about Mahomes and his wide receivers and Travis Kelce and all that.
Yeah, they are 15.9. They're really good defensively and offensively. I mean, much like the Super Bowl, though, like they didn't have that game-breaking player, and that's why maybe you thought the Eagles had the advantage. They don't have that player again on this team. It is not this high-powered Chiefs offense that we remember from years ago, but it's even less this year. They're really relying a lot on their defense.
And it surprises me because as far as skill position players, the one guy that they didn't bring back was Juju Smith-Schuster, who was sort of a catch the ball for 6 or 7 yards type guy. It's not like he was an explosive threat in their offense. I mean, he could give you some good plays, but and then they obviously drafted Rashee Rice. But they've really not gotten a whole lot out of Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, and they invested a 2nd-round pick in a trade for a former first-rounder, and those guys really have not come through for them. So, it surprises me how they could have gone from being so prolific last year, only losing Juju Smith-Schuster really, and being much more, I don't want to call them mediocre. They still are pretty good, but they're not top 3 in any offensive spots. So for them, it's mediocre.
He's Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast. You can listen to on all podcasting platforms and check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. All right, Mosher, we'll talk to you next week, pal.
All right, Mike, take care.